A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
This is a pretty wild story, with two young people going missing, in the midst of a police car chase. There are so many questions about what happened, and really the more I got into it, the more I talked to the people involved who we interviewed, and the more I read about it, and the more I learned about it, and from looking through a lot of the documents that you're talking about from Paula, and I have to say, I've worked on a number of these missing persons cases for other episodes in various seasons of the series, but I mean, this one is really, it does stand out in a lot of ways. As I always hope with these things that it's really the people, where this story happened, they're watching most closely.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who will really know.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, even if it's one word.
And please subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos. We're also now on YouTube at Partners in True Crime. If you subscribe to our website, you'll be getting weekly emails from us and all kinds of promotions and things that we don't advertise on the podcast. As always with this case from the beginning, there is a lot of information that we still receive regarding to what happened to Molly and Colt. We still get tips and people are still reaching out who want to share what they know. And that is great. Please keep the information and tips coming.
A few weeks ago, Paramount Plus did a half-hour program on the Molly and Colt case called Never Seen Again. If you haven't watched it, we highly recommend it.
The program covers the major points in the case, and they interviewed some of the people who have been on this podcast as well as on the show we did for Oxygen.
The producers of Never Seen Again did a great job of highlighting the current theories of Molly and Colt's disappearance. But after consulting with the producers about the show, we thought it would be good to hear from them directly.
Chris Landon was one of the producers who worked on the show and helped craft the episode along with his team. We're happy to have him on the podcast to hear about his experience of digging into this mystery. So let's hear what he has to say.
All right, today we have Chris Landon. Chris was one of the producers on the Paramount Plus Never Seen Again with Molly and Colt. It's an ongoing series of missing people cases. And so we're happy to have him on the show today. So how you doing, Chris?
I'm good, Rob. How are you?
Good. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first and kind of give the audience an idea of, what your career is, what you do for a living, and how you got involved in this Molly and Colt story.
Sure, yeah. So I have a bit of a varied background in terms of my career. Done a few different things in my life. I was working sort of in academia, actually, a few years ago. I have a PhD in medieval history of all useless things, working on a postdoctoral fellowship, doing research, writing articles, teaching, lecturing, that sort of thing. The COVID pandemic hit. Like a lot of people, it kind of upended plans. I was going to go take up a research appointment in Germany. That didn't happen because of all the travel shutting down and everything. At the same time, my wife got a job offer in a different place. We moved, and like a lot of people during the pandemic, I kind of did some self-reflection and decided it was time to change things up career-wise. So I had a friend who was working in TV. He connected me with something. So I started there as a researcher on a science documentary series. And not too long after that, I was offered a position working as an associate producer on Never Seen Again, actually. And so for the past few years, I've been working, writing, some directing, some producing. We've done 2 series of Never Seen Again. I've done some other shows too, like FBI True and a few other things. But Never Seen Again has been definitely the highlight of my TV career so far, in terms of working on really compelling stories that matter with people, that matter to people, with contributors who are really need to get these stories out there.
Yeah, so you went from academia to right into the true crime world.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty much.
But that's good, though, because all that research background in the academic world really works and helps a lot, especially in true crime cases, because there's such heavy research for these kinds of shows, more so than other types of shows. This genre really needs people like you who do the research.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I've run into actually a surprising number of people kind of, out of escapees from the academic world in true crime and TV in general. But yeah, I think there's a level of meticulousness that you learn, doing academic research that serves you well, doing this kind of work, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, especially for you. I mean, you were history, right? Academic history.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that detail, I mean, it's all looking at the history of these crimes, because a lot of them are sometimes 20, 30 years old, and you have to go back and analyze all these case files and evidence and stories and scenarios and kind of piece together to kind of find out what the actual true history of this crime is.
I mean, I know for this case, when we did it for Up and Vanished, I had 6 boxes of police reports and statements and paperwork and legal paperwork to go through. I mean, it was thousands of pages, and it was like I kept saying, I feel like I'm getting my PhD in this case.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I know you guys have been digging into this for a long time, and that's true. And I mean, one of the really good things about Never Seen Again as a series is, I think, also that it's the people at the top take that very seriously. It's Susan Zirinsky, who's the former president of CBS News, is the kind of the top one executive producer. The showrunner is Solly Granatstein, who was a producer on 60 Minutes for years. So I think there's a real prioritization of, the facts of the case and getting it right.
Absolutely. We know Susan, she's wonderful. I think that's absolutely the way that it needs to be for true crime. It's not something that you can just wing or color in, make up scenarios. It has to be true. You have to keep these stories true. They have to be.
Well, you got to have your sources.
You have to have sources. You have to source things. You can't just say things, and I think that a lot of shows don't have that same pressure as true crime shows.
Yeah, you've got to definitely show your homework, and at the same time, there's also, you have to combine that with a real sensitivity, I think, to the people involved, because these are not, the first word in true crime is true, right? And I think it's important to keep in mind that all of these people are real people and real families that this stuff has happened to, that are living with this, and so true crime has become a pretty major, entertainment commodity. And I mean, these stories are, listened to and watched and consumed by lots of people because they are so compelling. But you've got to keep in mind, absolutely, that it's that they're real people, that these things are happening to, and I suppose that's part of the reason that they're so compelling to people too, because these are not stories that are just written on a page. They're real things in real life.
Yeah, I know. It's we've been doing it for a long time, and we have all the cases and police officers that we've dealt with, investigators. We've developed our personal relationships with all these people because you get so far deep inside the case, and you have to constantly share and talk about information when it comes up. So, we may not we had our podcast after we did the Up and Vanish series, and we actually were going to do a 2-hour of Molly and Colt's case, and it just didn't fit within the programming structure, and so we had to cut it down to 1 hour. And then after we were done in the series, they were like, hey, this case, there was a bunch of cases that we thought needed more attention, and then Paula, we came very close to her and her cause, and felt like, and she had so much information that we felt like, hey, listen, we need to get this out there. And the easiest way to do it was through the podcast. And so we did 45 episodes over 2 years. And then we stopped down for a little bit, for about a year. And then right about when we stopped down, midway through, is that when I started getting contacted by you guys about your production team about doing the episode for Never Seen Again. And so we started collaborating with you and kind of sharing information, because at the end of the day, anybody can get this information out, but anyway, to keep it in the limelight, because it really hasn't been. When we finished the series Up and Vanished, we decided there was still a lot of information. There was still a lot of information to get out there. Paula had mounds of information, recordings, police reports that she needed help. And so we found the best way to keep it out there is through the podcast. And then we did that. And then we took a break for like a year. And then like halfway through our break, we got contacted by your production team, and you guys were interested in doing a story on it. And we were like, great, this is awesome, because it doesn't make a difference who gets the story out there, as long as we keep it out there so people know that's, we keep the case alive and the investigation alive, because that's what we've been doing with the podcast. Because law enforcement really wasn't doing a whole lot. They said that it was, every time we talked to them, they said it was an active case, so they couldn't share any information, but we also knew it was a cold case. They really weren't doing anything. And then by the podcast and kind of poking through a bunch of the case holes and bringing on witnesses and people and tips. So we were very excited when you guys decided to do another show. Tell us a little bit about how you got the information for the show, how you brought onto the show, and then when you got into it, what did the case mean to you, and what did you think of the dynamic of this case?
Sure, yeah. So in this series, there are generally 3, 4, 5 at any given time story producers who are, actively looking for different potential stories, and in various stages of production, whether that's, finding contributors, interview subjects, going out and doing the field production, or doing it remotely in a lot of cases, editing and so on. Anyway, one of my colleagues, who Chris McClure, he really hit upon this story. He had he was kind of tied up with another story at the time. And so I took this one on from him, and so he really gets credit for finding it and making a connection with you to bring it to us. The moment I saw it, I thought, from a television perspective, from a television story perspective, it obviously had a plot. I mean, this is a pretty wild story, with 2 young people going missing, in the midst of a police car chase. There are so many questions about what happened, and really the more I got into it, the more I talked to the people involved who we interviewed, and the more I read about it, and the more I learned about it, and from looking through a lot of the documents that you're talking about from Paula, and I have to say, I've worked on a number of these missing persons cases for other episodes in various seasons of the series, but I mean, this one is really, it does stand out in a lot of ways as being particularly complex and kind of like a bit of an onion. You peel back one layer and there's just more there, and the more you think you've got your hands around something, it seems sometimes to slip away. So talking to Paula and to Misty, every family I've talked to who has wanted to do one of these shows has dedicated and devoted and obviously driven to get answers. And, I could see that right away talking to Paula and Misty. Those were sort of my first impressions of this case and this story. And then, putting it together, it's like I said, there's so many question marks in this case, and you guys have spent a long time, I think, on this podcast talking about all of those questions and kind of delving into all the different possibilities of what might have happened. That it was challenging putting this episode together, because we only, you did an hour, I think, and we did 22 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we had some discussions too about possibly should this be a 2-part episode? And again, as in your case, for production reasons, we had to keep it to a single episode. And so it was figuring out what do you address, what do you include, what do you leave out. You have to try to while making a coherent story and hopefully pushing things in some new direction. Hopefully, that's always the hope with all of these episodes. I mean, the great hope would be to, knock something loose or to, for somebody to watch it and think, oh, that thing that I didn't think of before, that I didn't think was important. Maybe it was, and maybe report that, call that in, and maybe get some answers. So those were sort of the first things that hit me. And then like I say, as we moved on into the production, it's a challenging story because there are so many questions. Things are clear up to a point, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I mean,
and I think that's what you guys focused on in your episode, because you only had a minimal amount of time, is the clear aspects of the case, like the chase and the call off of the chase and you know, where the car was found, and, you know, those elements in the first 48 hours of the case. And then, you know, sometime after
And then even
that.
I like the way that you guys also talked about the different theories and brought in the grand jury trial of Joe Russell. I think that's really important for people to understand what his role was in all of this in the beginning. Because like you know, from doing all these episodes of Missing People, those first 48 hours are crucial. And the fact that he didn't do much in those first 48 hours really was a hindrance to this case.
Yeah, that was something that we heard from everybody, and obviously Joe Russell ended up in some legal hot water for various other reasons. But yeah, it's clear, you know, like you've got these two young kids. They're in a car with somebody. There is this police chase. The car is at some point. Molly and Colt part ways with the driver of the car. The car is abandoned somewhere, you know, and then they're on the phone with various people. And so they're kind of like, they seem to be lost, but perhaps not missing per se. And then once those phone calls end, you know, everything's up in the air.
Yeah. No. Yeah, that's where it is. We interviewed a lot of the same people plus others, you know, between the podcast and the television show that we did. And so it's crazy how people close to the case and also people that worked for the Love County Sheriff's Department, like you interviewed John Denny, and he had a lot of information. And I remember the first thing he said to us, and I think, Cindy, you were interviewing him at the time.
I was.
And then you basically said, you know, does Joe know what happened? And the first thing he said is, he knows.
Yeah.
He knows what happened. And when we heard that from someone who's worked closely with him, and then we've also had people who've worked at the Sheriff's Department at various positions also say the same thing. We're like, well, there's the nexus of the issue here, is that the proper search of her then never happened in the beginning. Paula was the one who actually initiated the first search and other searches after that. When we saw that in Paula and we saw the Herculean task that was basically thrust upon her, this housewife who is, you know, takes care of her kids and her grandkids and doesn't even live in the area anymore, but is connected to Molly through her, you know, as a cousin. When she told us that story, which she recounted with your interview about when Molly came to visit her, and then her son, who had a drug problem too, he recognized what Molly was doing right away when they left, and he said that, you know, we should really get her back. So that moment was Paula's calling to do something after Molly never came back. She always goes back to that moment. She says, I could have done something then. Now I have to do something. So
yeah, and it's really eerie, you know, when you do, you know, a number of these stories and you talk to a lot of these different families. It's eerie how often there seems to be some kind of gut feeling at the time that something is wrong, you know, either at the time of the person's disappearance or shortly before, where, you know, from an outside perspective, you might look at it and say, oh, well, like, it's just a normal situation. But often there are these stories of people having these kind of, just these I wouldn't want to say premonitions exactly, but these
well, they are premonitions. I mean, you know, I think, you know, when you're closely connected to someone, and she was, you know, I mean, she was family, and she loved Molly, and at that moment, you know, I mean, I think we all have those things. If you're parents and you kind of know when things are happening with your kids or something's wrong with a family member, like before something happens, and then you get the call. So I think there is something that we're in tune with negative vibrations that come out. And I think that's what you're explaining when you talk to these victims' families, is that they're like, yeah, I knew something bad was going to happen. It always starts with that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we always try to tell everyone, to always trust your instincts, always trust your intuition, because you're getting messages that you need to pay attention to when you get those feelings. And I think as a society, we don't cultivate that as much as we should.
To go back for a second to what you said about, your first conversation with Johnny Denny, and all of these interviews that we did and everybody we talked to, you know, we try to be careful in selecting our contributors. We obviously kind of center the family and that family connection and telling things from the family perspective. That's got to be, you know, complemented by, you know, some kind of investigative angle, and in a lot of cases of unsolved cases of missing people, like we're talking about here, the family becomes the investigators. like in Paula's case. That's not totally uncommon. But you want to have ideally some law enforcement contribution, and we were lucky to talk to Johnny, I think, who had, like you say, a lot to say and a lot of stories. We, for all of our contributors, we usually do kind of like hour and a half, 2 hour sometimes interviews, and Johnny's was a longer one. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of stuff that he said that I would have loved to include, to kind of give some more context to what was going on in Love County at that time. But like we were saying before, you've got to make this a kind of you've got only so much time to fill.
I know. Go ahead, Sid.
John Dennehy wasn't the only one. We interviewed Ronnie Hampton, who was actually responsible for putting Khan in jail for the high-speed chase.
The second one
in 2014. And we've spoken to the 911 operators. We've spoken to a lot of people, and they've all said the same thing. It's that Love County Sheriff's Department, there were problems.
There was problems. I mean, I always, when I try to explain this case to people, I try to give them like a and to me, it's like a combination of the series Ozarks and Breaking Bad, because you have this southeastern Oklahoma, which has, it's got a big meth problem. And based upon all the information that we found, and also from the grand jury, there was, Joe Russell his son was running meth out of his house using his patrol car, delivering it. So it was like, and then when we got a hold of the grand jury, someone sent us the grand jury papers, and we went through it, and we actually read portions of the testimony on our podcast. We were like, holy shit, it's like, this is pretty deep. And then we started getting deeper and deeper into it. It was like, and everyone's been complaining about the corruption. There's quite a few books that have been written by judges who used to be judges in that area. Some of them they do it under the guise of a novel, but they basically detail the corruption that's been going on there for a long time, because it's a rural community. They don't have the best choice to vote for law enforcement people. And so the pool is thin, and their training is even thinner. And but amongst that, you have guys like Johnny, who is a stand-up guy. And he knew something was going wrong, and he knew something was wrong, and he was brave enough to talk to us about it, because everybody else, there's a lot of people afraid about the people in that area still.
Did you get that impression?
Yeah, I did. Certainly that Johnny was brave and wanting to, and really committed to getting the truth out. What he saw as injustices, I think he wanted to shine light on them. And yeah, it seems like there is, maybe not everybody in the area feels that way. It's very tricky because, again, like I was saying at the beginning, it gets so murky so quickly, and you hear different people saying different things, and it's hard to pin down the truth, after those phone calls stop.
Yeah, for us though, in all the research we did on this case, what happened with, like, we got tons of tips. We had when we started the podcast, we were getting people like at least once a week after the podcast, someone would reach out to us on our website or and say, I have information. He goes, but I don't want to use my name. Can you distort my voice? Can you hide my identity? And I said, absolutely. She goes, but I want to get the information out there. So when you're dealing with that kind of threat to witnesses, the people that know something, and there's a lot of people that know something. That area is. Did you get the chance to go down there, or we did everything remotely?
No, I had to do it remotely, unfortunately, because I was tied up with some other with multiple episodes going on at the same time.
Yeah, well, the area is very small, but it's rural and spread out. I mean, there's not that many people there. Everybody knows everybody. We actually went down and confronted Joe, and he didn't have anything great things to say about the family.
He told us F the family, and he did it on camera.
I've seen that. Yeah, I did watch your episode, and it's shocking. I mean, I'm from a small town. I'm from a rural area, but it's there's something very, very menacing about that. When that's the attitude of kind of the face of law enforcement.
When they're the people you're supposed to go there for help, and you can't go there for help.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the family, and like you said, a lot of these cases, like the Jennifer Kessie case, we did that case too. Her family had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars investigating their daughter's case. I mean, it's just crazy.
And that was not in a rural town. That was in Orlando.
That was in Orlando. But the point is that a lot of these family members have to become investigators, and they have to push. And they have to keep the case alive because no one else is doing anything. And it's not, I don't blame law enforcement. I think that there should be some kind of agency that specifically specializes in missing people
and cold cases
from the first minute that it happens, not 24 hours later or 48 hours later or whatever it is. I mean, I don't blame law enforcement for that, but situations like this is a little bit different because there's definitely was something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, after having, done quite a few of these episodes now, I've talked to a lot of cops who care deeply and are committed and are doing the best they can. Mm-hmm. And there are questions of resourcing. In some areas, there's also the fact that cops are not gods. These are complex cases.
Yeah.
And oftentimes with people purposefully trying to hide evidence and to prevent the truth from coming out. Mm-hmm. And so it's when police do their best to solve these cases and they can't, some people want to blame them, but it's difficult. There are other cases though where, the police have at best been ineffective or incompetent, or at worst actually obstructive for different reasons. The series premiere of Never Seen Again focused on the stories of a young man named Terrence Williams and another young man named Felipe Santos in Florida, who were independently last seen being put into the back seat of a patrol car by the same sheriff's deputy. And that was a really awful and scary case to cover because it's this, it looks very likely that this one sheriff's deputy, has something to do with these two men going missing at different times. Mm-hmm. And I guess you're talking about the same. Like I say, this is all very murky in Love County, mm-hmm. but there are a lot of people who have doubts about law enforcement and its involvement in Molly and Colt's disappearance.
Yeah. Now, there was a lot of things the balls were dropped. Obviously, Joe calling off the chase right away when he knew who it was, and they couldn't find the car right away. The car was magically found 2 weeks later. We actually went out to the site where the car was for the documentary we did, and it was probably, I'd say, not even maybe a couple football feet away from the yards away from the NIP property fence line. And we had a little incident that happened there while we were filming. Cindy can talk a little bit more about that, and we've talked about it before. And it's actually in the documentary where a laser sight was on her.
Yeah, laser was on me while we were filming, and I saw him in the field across the way. My DP was like, "Oh, I think we have a laser on us," and I was like, "Oh, great." But he was just being menacing. Con Nip has not been cooperative from the beginning. I mean, if I was Con Nip, I would want to help to do anything I could to find my friends that I was in the car with.
Especially since I was the last one to see them.
I just think it's strange.
Cindy, don't you want to eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals? Every fresh, never-frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes.
Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular choices like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also discover more than 60 add-ons every week like breakfast, on-the-go lunch snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day. What are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up on your springtime goals.
Cindy's always worried about what I'm eating, which is why I love Factor, because you can get chef-prepared meals on the table in 2 minutes with Factor's ready-to-eat meals.
Looking for gourmet meals? Try meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, truffle butter, broccolini, and asparagus.
No fuss, no messy meals. Factor meals eliminate the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning. Simply heat and savor the good stuff.
Tailor to your schedule, customize weekly meals with the flexibility to get as much as you need. Pause or schedule deliveries to suit your lifestyle. lifestyle.
Factor is your solution for fast, premium meals without the need for cooking.
We're celebrating Earth Day all month long. Look for Earth Month Eats badge on the menu for our lowest carbon footprint meals.
Head to factormeals.com/PITC50 and use code PITC50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active.
Hello, partners in true crime. How many of you have become skeptical about custom beauty? I get it. My feed is flooded with customize this, personalize that, all promising to fix my dry skin, split ends, fine lines. But when Prose says custom, they actually mean it. It's not a gimmick. Your formula couldn't exist without you.
Each and every bottle of Prose custom hair and skincare is made to order and personalize with a unique blend of naturally powerful and proven effective ingredients to meet your needs. Their in-depth consultation analyzes over 80 factors for a complete view of your life and beauty goals.
They get personal. Prose covers everything from your concerns to diet, exercise, and stress levels to uncover what's impacting your hair and skin health. They even asked me my zip code to understand how the UV index, water hardness, and the hot, dry desert weather where I live impacts me.
Next, they recommend a full routine of truly personalized products, which are only produced after I place my order. Nothing pre-mixed, nothing off the shelf.
And I know from experience that one-of-a-kind formulas equal 1 in a million results. We have really hard water at our house, and since I switched to Prose, I've noticed a complete difference. My hair is softer and stronger, and most importantly, it's not breaking.
But don't just take Cindy's word for it. In a third-party, double-blind, dermatologist-supervised control clinical study, aka the gold standard in research studies, Prose proved that personalization works better than off-the-shelf alternatives.
Try it for yourself and get your healthiest hair in 30 days, or your money back.
Prose is so confident that you'll love your results that they're offering our listeners an exclusive trial offer so you can see the difference custom care can make. 50% off your first subscription order at prose.com/PITC.
That's prose.com/PITC for your free consultation and 50% off of your one-of-a-kind formula. prose.com/PITC.
Hey everyone, if you love reality shows and love to hear all pop culture insider news, you're going to love this podcast.
The Sarah Fraser Show is a daily podcast covering pop culture, reality recaps like Sister Wives, 90 Day Fiancé, and your favorite Bravo shows, plus guests of all kinds. You might learn something too, and a splash of Sarah's own personal life. Hint.
She's trying to have her second baby at 42 and shares every last detail about it, for better or worse.
The Sarah Fraser Show has been featured in the New York Post, Daily Mail, and more.
You might have seen Sarah recently on Lifetime's Married at First Sight kickoff and mid-season show with host Kevin Frazier.
Check out The Sarah Fraser Show today, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I don't understand it. I don't understand the logic behind it. And I don't understand the menacing attitude and the F the family and all the hostility that's been pointed at Paula and people that are trying to find answers. It's just murky and very disturbing, to be honest.
It's like every time we've pushed for answers for questions, it's almost like, I mean, at this moment right now, I mean, we're getting flack for certain things that we've put out in the podcast and that we know are not true. And it's just gaslighting because they want us to go away.
Right.
And Paula, and we always tell Paula, I said, Paula, you tell us to stop and we'll stop. And she says, no.
Right.
Don't stop.
Well, she wants answers. She wants to find her cousin.
Exactly.
I mean, I would be the same way if it was my family member. I wouldn't stop. Did you reach out to Colt's family at all?
The Colt, yeah, we always make an effort to reach out to everybody involved, especially with families of missing people. In this case, we didn't get a response, and we wanted to, and we wanted to tell the story, and we thought that Paula was such an excellent and powerful advocate for Molly and Colt, and the mystery of them both going missing. We decided to put the focus on her.
Wait, quick question again. Let me just say that again because I kind of made a mistake. When you were in production or pre-production, did you reach out to Colt's family at all to participate?
Yes, we did.
And did you get a response from them?
No.
When we reached out to them, Jesse, his brother, was the only one that we interviewed. Didn't end up making into the cut because we had it slated for the 2 hour, but he was the only one from that. That and Colt's girlfriend.
The mother of his baby.
The mother of his baby. The girlfriend he had a baby with right before he died. So, yeah, it's a very touchy situation. And the biggest issue, I think, there is it's small town stuff. Everybody's related to everybody. I mean, Molly was related to Con. Everybody's related to everybody, and everybody knows everybody.
And some of Colt's family is related to the Nips as well.
By marriage.
Colt's brother was married to a Nip, so it's...
Yeah, you get into situations where it's not like in communities like that, where it's not, there are a lot of things going on, perhaps or possibly that you just can't really you can't be privy to, and there are all sorts it becomes very difficult because you're looking in from the outside, from the perspective of, okay, I've learned about this mystery, this case, and I want all the answers, but other people there might have other priorities, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a lot of other priorities there. And trust me, there's a lot of stuff that we have not unearthed or aired that would make people's heads spin about this case, because it's just too volatile, and it's not going to help the facts, but there's a lot of undercurrent of relationships here, and people knowing people and doing drug business with each other, and who did this and who slept with who and who was doing this. It's very, very, very salacious. But it all leads to a lot of the motivations of why people aren't talking, because they don't.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you. You talked about how a lot of people have reached out to you because of the podcast and the TV show with tips, and often they haven't wanted to use their own names or to be identified, but they want to get the information out. Have you found that information generally kind of agrees?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of the information is similar. A lot of the information is the same story that we've heard from the beginning.
Just from a different perspective.
And that's the thing. In these types of cases, at least this has been our experience, and tell me if you feel this as well, since you've done so many seasons now of Never Seen Again, which is a very good show, by the way. When you are looking at a case, those first couple of days, people are talking. And they are making police reports, and they are making statements, and they are saying, because everything's fresh and everything just happened, and they're not thinking that this is going to go on for a decade. So there's a lot of information in those first couple of days that, if you look at all the years that have happened since then, and all the paper and all the statements and all the police reports, that pretty much stays consistent. It's, at least in this case for us, it's been consistent. Like, those names that came up in the beginning have been consistent throughout for the past 10 years.
And obviously you guys felt the same way, because it's basically in the shortened version of the story. It's the same. It's basically what we knew like in 2018 is exactly what Paula knew right after it happened, is what we knew in 2018, and what you guys knew when you produced this show, is that 3 people in a car chase go into the woods, 1 person comes out.
Yeah, well, that's about it right there.
Yep.
You put it succinctly. Yeah, that's it. It's there is 1 person from that car chase who is still around today.
Right. And that person's not talking to anybody.
Well, they're selectively talking.
Well, he's never been on television. He's never been in any media interviews. Everyone who's asked him to interview, including Carolyn from KXII, who was on Never Seen Again, she hasn't been able to get anything out of him either. He doesn't speak publicly about anything that's happened, which we find bizarre.
Yeah. From what we know, he's only had 1 curated, or maybe a couple, maybe Joe interviewed him. We have a statement from Joe, which is like,
yes.
I don't know if you saw that written statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it looks very official, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like a 1-page statement on a letterhead, and that one. And then there was another curated interview with a local auxiliary police officer and an attorney who's now Colt, Con's attorney. And that was curated, and that was done with the OSBI. But even the person who had that interview with him even walked away, said Con knows more than he's telling. He's not totally out of this. But so there's still a lot of information out there, and people aren't talking. And some people are dying. Some of the people that had information are no longer with us.
But a lot of the tips that have come in are reflecting a lot of the information that was early on in the case. It's consistent.
Yeah.
The tips are consistent. I mean, we have like a wall with all of these things pointing to each other. And I would say there's about 2 or 3 theories that have been consistent with multiple people saying the same thing.
And we just got some more information today on a theory that, we're still trying to sort out, like literally today, a new name. So it's like, it's still active, because I think some people, because it spikes. When we put out a podcast, we usually get tips.
And when the TV show is helpful too. That's why we were
Exactly.
so happy that you guys were doing it, because it helps. You know, we just want to get an answer for this poor woman. This 10 years
Yeah,
of...
I mean, well, like you were saying, I mean, it is often the case that, you know, that information that comes in the early days is kind of like the information that continues to be the focus of any subsequent investigation. And now occasionally you do get a big discovery, a big turn sometime later, but often that's not the case. And often these stories go on and they go on and they go on. And you're right that the longer they go on, the colder things get, right? Tips dry up, memories become faulty, people pass away. And so the longer a case goes without being solved, the truth is, the less likely it is to get solved. And that's why so many of these families are so desperate to get the story out there and to keep it in front of people and to remind people, well, there is still a chance of getting answers. Yeah, and I think I hope that this episode of Never Seen Again does, you know, get this story out there and get people talking, you know, for a national and international audience. I always hope with these things that it's really the people, you know, where this story happened, they're watching most closely.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who will really know.
Yeah. No, it happens to us all the time.
If anybody does.
Yeah. No, and it happens to us all the time. Like, you know, people like the call we got today.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they were listening to last week's podcast, the last 4 that we did, where I interviewed Jesse, Colt's brother, who's behind bars now for something completely unrelated, and then Paula and Misty's reaction to it. And, you know, we got a call today from someone close to the case, giving us some very kind of interesting information that is not going to solve the crime, but connects the people who've done something similar than that, her names are mentioned. So it's not like Molly and Cole are not the first people to disappear in Love County.
No. There's another really famous case in Love County that is, I've spoken to some of the people involved in that, and they feel like it could be related to Jordan Buckaloo. I don't know if that came up in your research at all.
Yeah.
It did, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I came across this, that, there was, one man in particular who had gone missing, and I had read, I read some speculation. Yeah, that there could be a connection. That's right. It was in, you know, some, there was some, you know, somebody's opinion in some official documentation, basically, that these could be related.
And there's other stories about people mysteriously killing themselves with no witnesses and all that kind of stuff. And then you kind of start tracing back what was their role, you know, what did they do for a living? And you feel like, oh, well, this guy, you know, he was part of the meth trade. So it's like there's this whole thing.
And it's unfortunate because sometimes, like when we did the Green River Killer case, a lot of the victims were prostitutes or were using drugs, and they get dismissed. It's almost like, you know, West Mesa serial killings. Those girls were Hispanic or, you know, Indian, Native American, and they get dismissed. So it's the same here. A lot of this is the same. These people are on drugs. Everybody's on meth. So the case gets dismissed in the beginning. You know, it doesn't get the same exposure that a lot of other cases get, which is unfortunate, which is why...
That's a real tragedy.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's really important to keep the story alive.
And with this one in particular, there was quite a few people that came out early on and started talking, and then they were quickly discounted by law enforcement because they used meth. You know, and then we'd have like NYPD homicide detectives on that we know, and we'd ask them, we'd say, would you discount a drug dealer's testimony if they saw something and if they were a user? He says, absolutely not. Why would you do that? I go, they were there. They saw it. Who cares if they did drugs? So there's a lot of that going on. And then you have the flip side of it where some people who would say that, oh, well, that person did meth, so their testimony is no good. But then they would present someone
who also does meth.
Who also does meth. But it works for their narrative, and they're like, oh, well, this person's telling the truth.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to solve a crime that happened, you know, in a particular community, you got to talk to the people in that community.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is a common story, you know, that you know, whether it's like you say, whether it's people are discounted for all sorts of different reasons. You whether it's race or ethnicity or their social status, or if they're a drug addict or a drug user, and it's if you're trying to solve a crime, you got to talk to the people who know what happened and who know the people. And if in this case you're dealing with people who have been involved in the drug trade, possibly in one way or another, then those are some of the people you have to talk to.
Yeah, and then when you're looking to the law enforcement body who's supposed to be investigating a case, and then you find out that they're involved in the drug trade as well, and then it's like, where do you go?
Yeah, when those connections exist, it doesn't look. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't look good. It doesn't help to engender confidence.
No. I have a question. In all of your research on this case, did you come across anything that said that Jesse Colt's brother was involved in his murder?
So, I looked through a lot of documentation for this case. I don't recall ever coming across anything like that.
Yeah, neither did we.
Neither did we. So we were just curious if you saw anything different than we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because there's a lot there. I'm sure I could go back, because you get these little reminders on your phone from your photos saying a year ago, and I realized that it was actually this weekend, exactly 1 year ago, that I filmed most of these interviews, and so it was. it's been a little while since I read through all of these documents, and I could probably go back and find new things and remind myself about other things. But yeah, I don't recall any. There are a lot of things that I read that stuck in my mind. I don't recall reading anything.
What were some of the things that stuck in your mind?
Brother.
Say that again, Chris. I'm sorry.
I said that I read a lot of things in all of the documents that I had access to that stuck in my mind, but I don't recall reading anything about Jesse. I remember reading. Well, I wanted to know more, I guess, about the FBI's involvement in this, because it's clear that they were involved in some way, but it would be interesting to know more about that.
What was really interesting is after Joe Russell's grand jury proceeding, and it didn't, obviously he just got a slap on the wrist and, had to resign and like a year of probation in his house. The FBI agent that had the file on him, that actually was one of the reasons he was up at the grand jury hearing, is he walked up to Paula and he basically said, "You need to do a FOIA request on all my files." And because he was just like, he saw how disappointed Paula was, because there's a lot more in there. And so that was like, and we've tried to reach out to him several times, but, and we have former retired FBI agents that are friends of ours, and we asked them, and, we did FOIA requests, and, they can deny the FOIA request for anything.
Sure, yeah.
They don't have to give it to you. But I thought it was really interesting and telling. And then he was off the case, and I don't know why he's off the case, or FBI is not off the case. Now there is another federal agency on there, and it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and and then we filter anything that we get now, like tips and everything like that. We vet them out, and then we send them right over to them. Mm-hmm. We don't get any response from them. We just send it over. Said, this is what someone said to us. Here it is. Mm-hmm. Does it? We don't ask any follow up and everything, because they're not going to answer us anyway. But at least we're sending it to the investigative body that's currently looking into it. So that's what we've been doing, and I would say we do that probably once a month now. Even when we didn't have the podcast going, we still got tips in. I agree with you, because there's a lot of stories behind that. There's a lot of things in that file that I know some people that have seen that file, and I've asked them. I go, "Are we on the right path?" And they said, "Yep, you're on the right path."
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's all it'll tell us. Because the last thing we want to do is spread misinformation. We just want to, but if we're, on the right path, we're just going to keep on going.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like because I'm just curious from your perspective, because I felt in working on this story that, it was from the time that I started to the time that I finished, I felt like I knew a lot more, but I wasn't sure if I felt like I was any closer to getting the answers that I wanted. How do you feel after spending so long looking into this?
I think we're a lot closer than we're allowed to say at this point. And I think that it will start to come out soon what exactly happened. There's people that are finally starting to talk a little bit more and correlating a lot of the theories that we have discussed on the podcast.
And discounting some of the ones that are getting thrown out there.
Exactly. I feel in my gut that it is moving in the right direction at the moment.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm sure that the family is very glad to hear that as well.
Yeah. I mean, we're at a point now where there's going to be some deathbed confessions that are going to possibly start happening. And because I think that's the only, because people don't want to get involved. And some of the people that know information are afraid, but they can't keep it in anymore. We've had so many people call us and said, listen, I know something, but I'm like literally visibly, their voice is shaking on the phone.
Yeah.
Because, but I'm so scared to tell because they're going to know it's me. And those are really kind of nerve-wracking for us because number one, we want to get the story out there and we got to get the information out, but we don't want to put anybody in jeopardy.
No, and we want to make sure that people are not being accused of something they didn't do. I mean, we're not accusing Khan of doing anything. What we're asking is, why haven't you spoken?
Yeah, our biggest thing with him and the Joe Russell, the Khan, the Colby Barrack, we just feel like they all know more than they're talking about. I mean, he was like, Colby was the first person I reached out to for the television series. He was actually in federal prison at the time, and I wrote him a letter. Says, listen, and I basically was like, listen, your name's coming up a lot. Do you want to tell us anything? Do you want to discount anything? Nothing.
I mean, a lot of those 911 recordings are very suspicious.
Yeah, the one you used at Moxley Lake. The one,
It's I mean, that's the kind of thing that for a television show, it's very you've got this kind of natural sound stuff. You want to try to use it. It is suspicious just in that he's somebody whose name has again come up a lot in connection with this story. Molly's name is mentioned. There's something's being said about Molly.
Yeah.
And what is it? The recording quality is so poor. The reception's so poor. You can't understand a lot of what's being said. The gunshots that you hear at the end, like whether or not those have any relevance to anything, who knows? But they're talking about Molly, and I think everybody who knows something about Molly should be saying, what it is that they know and what are they talking about.
The interesting thing, did you hear the call that the dispatcher made to Joe Russell right after she heard that call?
Yes.
And did you hear what he said?
Yes.
He knew it was at Moxley Lake. How did he know it was at Moxley Lake?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Because there's a lot of lakes around there. I mean, just in that area, Moxley Lake there, just in there's like 4 of them. Because we know the gentleman who owns the property. We actually went and we drained that pond. We actually drained it. And we went out there with cadaver dogs, and we brought out retired FBI agents and Cheryl Mack McCullum, who's a cold case CSI investigator out of Atlanta in Fulton County. And we brought a team out there, and we drained it, and we used an excavator, and we went through the whole thing. And that cadaver dogs, over a 6-month period, 2 different times, hit like crazy all over that place. Now, we don't know what's down there, whether it's Molly and Colt, but there's remains there. It could be remains from 100 years ago. Who knows? But there's something there, and that needs to be reinvestigated. There's a lot of areas that they're trying to get permission to do searches at. That's where they're at right now.
I'm really glad that you guys had Tim Miller from EquiSearch on, because I think that what he said is exactly true. I do not believe that they died from exposure.
Yeah. I mean, Tim was, it was so good to talk to him. He's kind of what he's been through and what led him to starting EquiSearch, his search and rescue organization, is awful. He's kind of obviously his daughter was murdered.
Yep.
And he's the Texas killing fields is about him and his experience, among other families who lost people. He's kind of it's kind of awful, but he's almost a little bit of a true crime celebrity in his own right.
He is.
But his dedication to trying to find people is incredible. When you spend a little bit of time working in the world of true crime, it's shocking how many times his name comes up, how many cases you end up working on where it's like, oh yeah, and EquiSearch was involved.
Oh,
listen, It's like you become an expert, and not by choice. I mean, it's like almost a 10,000 rule. You know, it's like he's been doing it so much that he is an expert at what he's doing. In fact, we brought him out. We got a tip that there may have been, you know, in this one pond that was like about 45 minutes northwest of Love County. And so we called him up and we organized a search with that. The problem is that the law enforcement heard about it. And then when they showed up, we weren't physically there, but we actually sent a crew there, a camera crew. They were all there and they started dictating the search. And so, and the pond wasn't that big, and they were going to, you know, Tim wanted to do a side scan sonar of the whole pond. And within like 20 minutes, he found something in there, and they didn't bring divers down. And so, you know, and they were pressuring him, and I felt like he didn't have the time to do what he needed to do because it was Paul the Search. And then he came in and glommed onto it, and they weren't happy that we were there with cameras. And so it was like, there's been a lot of that kind of resistance from when they should be like, you know, if a private citizen is going to organize a search, basically helping them out and doing and discounting theories and stuff. So that's why it's like, it's all about checking things off the list.
I mean, sometimes it's even just as important to say, okay, that's not it.
Exactly.
Let's move on. You know, it's...
Oh yeah, of course. It's about ruling things out, you know. Never Seen Again, it's kind of, you know, its format, its structure is based around, you know, theories. And we look at some of the theories of what could have happened. And in this case, it's theory one is that they could have skipped town because some people were saying that. And of course, in the early
well, actually, only one person was saying
yeah,
that. And
Joe Russell had gone. Right. I spoke to the news reporter who was there at the time, and he told her that straight up the first night. And she was like, huh? You know, okay. I mean, she didn't know because she was listening to him. But he was saying that. He started that, and so did Khan. I mean, Khan even wrote that in his statement.
Yeah, and I think we addressed where that, you know, as far as we understand where that was coming from. But the second theory was, like you said, you know, they could have died of exposure. And yeah, Tim, who's an expert in search and rescue in these kinds of conditions, in these kinds of areas, he didn't think that was likely at all. I mean, I grew up in a small town in a rural area, and, you know, the idea that people would get lost in, you know, some on a, you know, kind of a known property, I mean, maybe it's not impossible, but it seems unlikely, you know, and that takes us to the third.
Well, the fact that those people were like Colt and Con, they knew that area like the back of their hand.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go in there, there's like there's all these little kind of roads, and they're all straight, and then and there's lots of fencing. Everybody's property is fenced, so it's like. Yeah,
that's what I mean. This is not like you know, completely. This is not like some like wild wasteland. This is, you know, these are rural and farm properties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so that leads you to the third possibility that I think it was Caroline Cluis, the reporter who said it in our show, that, you know, that somebody was stopping them from leaving the property that night. That seems like a more and more likely explanation.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, what do you think about this case? Like, what's your overall viewpoint about this case? I mean, you've done all these other missing people.
Yeah.
Where do you rank this one?
Well, it's up there in terms of the degree of mystery about what happened, and it's frustrating in the sense that there are so many people involved and so many theories and so many names thrown around there, but, you know, still nothing as of yet that is completely solid, you know, to hold on to. And so hopefully with this Never Seen Again episode, and with your podcast and with Paula above all, you know, continuing to push forward, hopefully some answers are found.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for talking to us today and for producing this show. I mean, it's really important.
Oh, well, thanks. No, it was very much done with you guys and your work, kind of like standing at the foot of all this. So thank you. And I appreciate you having me on. It was really nice talking to you.
Great. Thank you so much. If you have any information regarding the case, please contact the BIA at www.bia.gov/BIA/missing-murder-unit.
You can also call their hotline with tips at 1-833-560-2065 and email them directly at ojs_mmu@bia.gov.
And if you want to text them with a tip, text keyword BIA-MMU and send your tip to 847-411.
Check the Partners in True Crime website for this and any additional information.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.